Patton tore the report from the captain's hand before the ink had dried, because the wounded German prisoner on the stretcher was pointing at a fresh tire track behind the aid tent. An American medic was shouting that 3 POWs were missing from the count, and one lieutenant was already trying to drag a blood-stained blanket into the fire barrel. But when Patton kicked the barrel over and saw the hidden dog tags fall out, every officer in the yard knew the lie had moved too late. The camp yard had been quiet until the ambulance came through the gate without its rear canvas tied down. 2 German prisoners sat inside with bandaged arms. 1 American medic stood on the running board, and a 3rd prisoner lay across the stretcher with one hand hanging over the side. An American captain walked fast beside the ambulance, holding a report folder against his chest. He told the guards the convoy had arrived complete, the prisoners had been counted, and the wounded had been treated on the road. His voice sounded steady, but he did not look at the stretcher. Patton arrived at the same moment from the command lane, saw the loose canvas, and ordered the ambulance stopped before it reached the infirmary. The captain tried to step in front of him with the report, but the wounded German prisoner lifted one shaking hand and pointed toward the rear wheels. The tire track behind the ambulance was wet with blood and mud, running from the back gate to the aid tent. A medic shouted that 3 names from the transfer sheet were not inside the vehicle. The captain said the missing men had been reassigned before departure, but the medic held up the original count card and said no one had signed them out. Near the fire barrel, a young lieutenant grabbed a folded blanket from the ambulance floor and moved too quickly toward the flames. Patton saw the movement, crossed the yard, and tore the report from the captain's hand before the captain could finish speaking. The lieutenant pushed the blanket into the barrel, but Patton kicked the barrel hard enough to knock it sideways. Ash spilled across the dirt, the blanket rolled open, and 3 metal dog tags slid out beside a torn German medical card and an American convoy pass. The yard changed instantly. Guards raised rifles. Prisoners behind the fence pressed forward. The captain reached for the tags, but Patton stepped on the edge of the blanket and ordered every officer in the yard to freeze where he stood. The medic identified one dog tag as belonging to a German prisoner who had been loaded alive that morning. The second belonged to a man listed as transferred. The 3rd tag was not German. It belonged to an American driver who had escorted the same convoy 2 days earlier and had been reported injured but stable. Patton ordered the ambulance searched in public. Under the stretcher board, MPs found rope fibers, a broken syringe, and a folded field map with a farmhouse circled in pencil. The captain claimed it was an old route map, but the wounded German prisoner began striking the stretcher rail with his fist. The interpreter bent over him and listened. The prisoner said the convoy had stopped at the circled farmhouse, that 2 German POWs had been removed, and that the American driver had argued with the officers before vanishing from the road. Patton ordered the captain, the lieutenant, and the convoy clerk separated under guard. He placed the dog tags, blanket, map, and report folder on a crate in the yard, then ordered the ambulance held in place until every lie in the report had a witness standing beside it. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. Patton sent an armed patrol to the farmhouse before the first evidence label was dry. He ordered the wounded German prisoner kept alive under guard, the ambulance locked, and the convoy officers watched from opposite ends of the yard so none could shape the same story twice. The captain demanded to know why his word was being questioned in front of prisoners. Patton ordered the interpreter to repeat the question loudly, then pointed at the dog tags and the ash and said no officer who burned evidence had the right to complain about embarrassment. The patrol reached the farmhouse at noon and found fresh wheel marks in the lane, a torn stretcher strap in the barn, and a patch of straw soaked with medicine. Behind the stable wall, an MP found a field jacket with an American driver's name written inside the collar. A French farmer appeared from the orchard and told the patrol he had seen the convoy stop at night. He said one American officer shouted in anger, one German prisoner was dragged into the barn, and a second ambulance left without lights after midnight. The patrol returned with the farmer, the jacket, and the stretcher strap. Patton had everything placed on the evidence crate beside the burned blanket. The captain said civilians often misunderstood military movement, but the farmer pointed at the lieutenant and said that was the man who carried the blanket. The escalation sharpened when the convoy clerk was searched again. Inside his boot lining, MPs found a second transfer sheet with 3 names scratched out and rewritten in a different hand. The rewritten names matched the dog tags found in the fire barrel. The clerk broke before the captain could stop him. He admitted the first report had been prepared before the convoy even returned. He said the captain ordered him to list the missing prisoners as reassigned because headquarters was already angry about delays and lost vehicles. Patton ordered the motor pool checked. A mechanic found 1 ambulance missing from the inventory, the same second ambulance the farmer had described. Its fuel log had been altered, but the grease pencil marks still showed a late-night issue signed by the lieutenant. The captain tried to shift blame to battlefield confusion, saying wounded men had been moved in haste. Patton ordered the wounded German prisoner carried closer to the evidence crate, and the prisoner identified the captain's voice as the one that ordered men removed from the convoy. A runner then arrived from the back gate with a guardhouse note. Someone had tried to destroy the gate log by soaking it in oil, but half the page survived. The surviving lines showed the missing ambulance left the camp after midnight with 2 American officers and no registered passengers. Patton ordered the gate guards questioned in front of the command tent. One guard said he allowed the ambulance out because the captain's pass carried emergency authorization. When the pass was shown to him, he pointed to the signature and said the ink looked different from the one he had checked at the gate. The escalation ended with the forged pass, fuel log, second transfer sheet, farmer's statement, and dog tags forming one chain. The officers had not made a reporting error. They had moved wounded men at night, changed the record before sunrise, and tried to burn the proof before Patton reached the yard. The major consequence came when the missing ambulance was found abandoned near a rail siding 3 miles east of the camp. Its rear doors hung open, one wheel was sunk in mud, and the inside floor had been scrubbed so hard that the paint was scratched raw. An MP found blood beneath the metal hinge where water had not reached. Another found an American driver's glove behind the spare tire. The glove had 2 fingers cut open, and inside it was a note written in pencil. "They are moving prisoners without record." The patrol searched the rail siding and found an empty freight shed with straw pressed into body shapes across the floor. On the wall were 3 scratches shaped like initials. One matched the German prisoner, whose tag had fallen from the fire barrel. Patton ordered the rail siding sealed and sent medics, photographers, and an interpreter back with the patrol. This time he sent the convoy clerk too, under guard, to identify who had used the site and which officer controlled the movement. The clerk pointed to a side office in the shed. Inside, MPs found a coffee tin filled with morphine labels, ration slips, and a half-burned American message form. The form named the missing driver and stated that he had reported illegal prisoner movement before being ordered off the convoy. When that message form returned to camp, the captain stopped speaking. Patton placed it on the crate beside the dog tags and ordered the captain stripped of field command pending investigation. The captain's sidearm was removed in front of the prisoners, guards, and medics. The consequence spread fast. Every convoy from the previous week was frozen for review. No officer could file a corrected report without witness signatures. No wounded prisoner could be moved after dark without 2 medical officers and a gate entry. An American nurse from the aid tent came forward with a sealed envelope she had kept hidden. She said the missing driver had given it to her the day before, telling her to open it only if he disappeared. Inside was a copy of his complaint about unauthorized prisoner removals. The complaint named the captain, the lieutenant, and 1 major from headquarters who had pressured officers to reduce prisoner counts before inspection. The major had not been in the yard. That made the lie larger than 1 convoy and more dangerous than 1 burned blanket. Patton ordered headquarters notified that the major was not to leave his office. Then he sent MPs to recover all inspection records from the last month. The captain shouted that Patton was destroying his own chain of command, but Patton answered by placing the driver's glove on the evidence crate. The consequence became personal when the wounded German prisoner died before sunset. The medics signed the death report, noting that the man had tried to testify while in shock and that his dog tag had been found hidden in a burned blanket before his name was secured. Patton ordered the dead man's statement preserved, the nurse's envelope copied, and the missing driver's complaint attached to the case. The lie had now produced a death report, a missing American witness, a forged convoy record, and a formal accusation reaching beyond the camp. The major reversal began when MPs entered the headquarters major's office and found him calmly preparing a clean file for the inspection team. He claimed he knew nothing about the missing ambulance, but his clerk dropped a folder when the MPs entered, and loose pages slid across the floor. One page was a draft order directing convoy officers to adjust prisoner categories before inspection. Another page listed wounded German POWs as deceased before their medical reports were complete. At the bottom was a note to reduce visible failures in transport handling. The major insisted the wording was administrative, not criminal. The MPs searched his locked drawer and found a private ledger listing problem witnesses, including the missing American driver, the nurse, the wounded German prisoner, and 2 medics who had questioned convoy counts. The reversal struck the camp when the nurse identified her own name in the ledger. She had believed the driver was trying to expose one convoy. Now the evidence showed officers were tracking anyone who challenged the reports. Patton ordered the major brought to the camp yard, not to the command tent. The evidence crate had grown into a full table. Dog tags, forged passes, fuel logs, the driver's complaint, the private ledger, and the draft order were laid out in rows while prisoners and soldiers watched. The major tried to speak as a senior officer and ordered the captain to remain silent. Patton cut him off and ordered the captain moved closer to the table. The captain suddenly looked less like the main liar and more like a man who had followed a system until the system abandoned him. The captain broke in front of the yard. He said the major had ordered several convoys to hide sick prisoners before inspections because overcrowding and injuries made the command look incompetent. He said the missing driver threatened to report them, and the lieutenant was told to move the driver with the prisoners to keep him quiet. The reversal turned again when the lieutenant, hearing the captain name him, shouted that the driver was still alive when the second ambulance left. He said the ambulance was sent to an old quarry clinic where unofficial wounded were being hidden until inspectors passed. Patton sent the fastest patrol available. At the quarry clinic, they found 2 German POWs alive, 1 American driver feverish on a cot, and a civilian doctor forced to treat them without proper records. The driver could barely speak, but he recognized the nurse's envelope when it was shown to him. The rescued driver returned to camp in an ambulance under guard. When he saw the major standing at the evidence table, he lifted his bandaged hand and pointed at him before saying a single sentence. The major ordered the names changed. The major reversal was complete. The captain was no longer the top of the lie. The burned blanket was no longer the beginning of the story. The entire chain led upward, from fire barrel to convoy, from convoy to rail shed, from rail shed to headquarters. Patton ordered the major relieved in public, his documents seized, and every officer connected to the false reports placed under guard. What had looked like one captain lying to save himself became a command-level cover-up that collapsed because a dying prisoner pointed at a tire track. The final irreversible event began before dawn when the rescued driver gave a full sworn statement from his hospital cot. He described the farmhouse stop, the rail siding transfer, the quarry clinic, and the moment he saw officers remove dog tags from men who were still breathing. Patton ordered the statement read aloud to the assembled officers. No one was allowed to interrupt. The major stood without belt or sidearm. The captain stood apart from him. The lieutenant stood under MP guard with his head lowered toward the dirt. The driver's statement named a fourth location, a storage depot where corrected reports were copied and old ones destroyed. Patton sent MPs immediately, and they arrived before the morning clerks opened the doors. Inside a stove, they found ashes from burned files and one unburned carbon copy trapped under a grate. The carbon copy showed the original prisoner count from the night convoy. It listed the dead German prisoner as alive, the two quarry POWs as alive, and the American driver as assigned to convoy protection. The corrected report removed all four names. The final evidence came from a locked steel cabinet inside the depot. It contained dog tags, medical cards, fuel records, and transfer corrections from four separate convoys. Each correction followed the same pattern. Wounded men disappeared from paperwork before inspection, then reappeared as deceased, reassigned, or lost in confusion. Patton ordered every officer named in those files arrested for formal inquiry. The major protested that arrests would damage command morale. Patton answered by ordering the dog tags from the cabinet poured onto the evidence table in front of every officer present. The sound of metal striking would ended the last defense. Soldiers who had believed the problem was one failed convoy now saw proof from four. Medics recognized names. Clerks recognized handwriting. Guards recognized passes they had trusted at midnight. The final irreversible order was written before noon. All prisoner transport reports from the sector were void until rechecked by medical staff, gate guards, and independent clerks. Any officer who altered prisoner status without witness confirmation would be removed and investigated. The captain asked to give a statement against the major. Patton allowed it, but did not free him. The captain's lie had helped hide living men, burn evidence, and move a wounded driver. Cooperation would enter the file, but it would not erase the burned blanket. The lieutenant was taken back to the fire barrel site and ordered to identify every item he had tried to destroy. He pointed to the blanket, the tags, the medical card, and the convoy pass. Each identification was written down and signed under guard. The final moment came when the rescued American driver was wheeled into the yard long enough to watch the corrected board replace the false report. For names were moved from missing or dead back to living witness status, including his own. By sunset, the major, captain, lieutenant, and depot clerk were loaded into separate vehicles. The evidence truck left first with the dog tags, carbon copy, driver's statement, and burned blanket sealed in crates. The lie had become too heavy to move quietly. The next morning, the camp report board carried the corrected names under armed guard, and the rescue driver's cot was moved near the window where he could see the evidence convoy leave. Patton did not gather the officers for a speech. He signed the final inquiry order, placed the burned blanket in the first crate, and watched the vehicles roll out separately, because the moment his own officers lied about prisoners, they stopped protecting the army and became part of the case. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WWII stories.